If you've experienced any type of trauma, from childhood abuse to an auto accident to natural disaster to war trauma, then in this video, I'm going to give you the research verified antidote to trauma. Hi, I'm John Hawkins Jr. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, certified trauma specialist, and co-founder of Hawkins Counseling Center. In this video, I'm going to give you the antidote to trauma, the number one, time and time again, research verified antidote to metabolizing traumatic events. And that is secure attachment, which I'm going to explain in a minute. And if you don't have one, I'm going to show you some ways to get one and actually change and rewire your brain and your nervous system through neuroplasticity. For many individuals, and for all of us, I would say, at times there's things that can exceed our ability to cope, whether we don't have the internal or relational resources to do so. Then that creates post-traumatic stress. I mean, probably all of you have heard of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Now we prefer to call that post-traumatic injury. It's not necessarily a disorder, even though it creates a lot of disorder. It's not just some disease you contracted that you're born with. So in trauma, when our capacities are overwhelmed or exceeded, the way the brain adapts to survive that event then leads to negative alterations in structures in the brain, neural networks in the brain that then create those symptoms that that people diagnose or identify with as PTSD. Things like traumatic intrusions, hypervigilance, chronic anxiety, maybe panic attacks, insomnia, avoidance strategies, whether that's using compulsive behavior, substances to numb the energy from the trauma, or I don't want to talk about that, go near that part of town where that happened. So anything that could trigger it, whether it's people, places, or things. So now the brain is stuck in this survival response. And so some of the negative effects of that is a chronic release of the stress hormone cortisol, which the studies have shown, some of the brain imaging studies, is a couple of the aspects of the brain that get most impacted are the hippocampus, which is where our explicit memories are. So that also gives context to things, help us, put that in the context of what we know already when we reevaluate our initial quick, spontaneous reaction to something. So that gets damaged by that chronic cortisol adrenaline release, which becomes neurotoxic to the brain. So then the person isn't able to regulate their emotions as much, memories. That's part of the brain we know definitively creates new brain cells called neurogenesis. So it starts to atrophy because it's killing cells from the chronic cortisol attacking it. Then another area is big parts of the prefrontal cortex, which are associated with what they call executive function, impulse control, problem solving, planning, logical thinking. This really gets overridden by another part of the brain, the amygdala, which you hear me talk about probably in almost every video. That's the brain's threat detector. So it is tracking 24/7, looking for any threats from social judgment to physical danger, whatever that is. And it immediately finds any hint of that, any association to that, fires off a fight, flight, or freeze response. So the amygdala is what we call the low road in neuroscience, and the prefrontal cortex is the high road. So let's say if you're walking through, an area at night or a room, and you see something and you quickly jump, and it's dark out, thinking it could be a possible intruder or somebody's going to jump me, but then I see that it's a tree or a sign that's dark and I couldn't tell. So then that's the reevaluation of areas of the prefrontal cortex and some of the areas right behind that. So when trauma, when that amygdala becomes so hyper aroused or activated, now it's just looking for chronic threats and seeing almost everything as a threat. And then it overpowers, I would say, the prefrontal cortex's ability to reevaluate, take a second look, think about that for a second, be reflective. And then there's stronger or I guess I would say thicker connections from the amygdala to the prefrontal cortex than the prefrontal cortex back down to the amygdala. So it's easier for that to go really fast and less so a lot of times, plus some of the fragmentation or dissociation that takes place adapting to a traumatic moment. So that's an area, like again, where we start to get these negative alterations from experiencing the trauma. Now, secure attachment, as I just mentioned, is the antidote, but it's also the thing that makes you the most resilient to trauma. So I'm going to speak briefly to some of the things that are different in the brains of individuals who have internalized a secure attachment history. So, and why they're able to be more resilient to traumatic events or metabolize those events easier than somebody who doesn't have that. So for those of you who maybe had that and you go through a traumatic event, the data shows us that most people won't end up with traumatic stress or PTSD. At some point, everybody will. None of us has an unlimited capacity. But if I call it the biggest shock absorber we have to trauma is secure attachment. Those of you who went through developmental or childhood traumas, if you don't have that, you're much more prone to develop PTSD from those single incident ones later in life or in adulthood. But in this video, I'm going to give hope to both classifications. So even if you've got that's developmental traumas, there's ways that I'm going to walk you through of how to start shifting at a neurological level my attachment system and get, I think it's Dan Siegel calls an earned secure attachment. So having secure attachment experiences being witnessed, listened to, responded to, empathized with, protected, the child or the adolescent as we're growing internalizes these experiences, and as the brain's developing all from infancy up until about 25 with the final aspects of the prefrontal cortex, this creates and fosters the development of really healthy neural circuits in the brain regions that are responsible for downregulating fear and anxiety, empathy, intuitiveness, all the kind of the seats of mental health. That's one of the biggest markers of mental health, is how fast we can down-regulate stress responses or interpersonal conflict, that we can get that regulated quickly and then be able to reattune or regulate and get a different outcome than when that doesn't happen correctly. So when you have those secure attachment experiences, you have a much bigger ability to regulate your emotions, your impulses, to decision-making, focus, attention, all this kind of stuff. Having secure attachment experiences also stimulates activity and has shown increased activity in the brain regions associated with social connection, empathy, from the anterior cingulate cortex and the insula. Don't worry about needing to know all these names. I just point them out for anybody that kind of wants to understand more, but you can just get the main thing is that I have a greater capacity for developing, maintaining healthy connections, empathizing with others, resolving conflict, because you need empathy to be able to do that, to put myself in someone else's shoes. So if you've got that history, it gives you a much bigger ability in this area. Brain imaging studies have shown increased activity in the ventral medial prefrontal cortex and the nucleus accumbens to positive social cues. So we talked about in trauma, the amygdala can often get very hyperactivated. So it's, it already has a negative bias to us already for survival reasons, but now it's seeing everything as threatening. So in individuals who've had secure attachment experiences, they get, the nucleus accumbens is where kind of the dopamine hits our pleasure center in the brain. So then, you have an increased reward from connecting, like neurochemically, where instead of like somebody who's got, a lot of trauma, you've got avoidance goals. I want to get away from things. I'm seeing everything is threatening. Where this way I actually get rewarded for going towards social connection. I want to connect with people. I have more social intelligence from having internalized these experiences. So this is what we want to work towards reestablishing or repairing if you never had it in the first place. Another thing that happens is this oxytocin or oxytocinergic system that we have. That's that bonding, love hormone or cuddling hormone, they call it. So getting connected securely to others releases oxytocin. And I talked a few minutes ago about the negative impact of chronic cortisol. The oxytocin release actually suppresses the stress response and gets cortisol back into balance and kind of puts it in check where it should be. So it's those, secure connections that trigger the ventral vagal nerve, the oxytocin, endorphins, which are part of our attachment system. They down-regulate a lot of those neurochemicals released as part of the stress response. And a quick note I would say on this is that many traumas, I would say the majority, have a relational component. So I understand for many of you that's really scary to develop secure connections, or you may not have individuals currently in your life who have secure attachment histories and characteristics of secure attachment, things like predictability, reliability, safety, trust, responsiveness, emotional engagement, attunement. So if you don't have these kind of individuals, start looking for them, people who've got aspects of that. Because if the people I'm surrounded with don't, they're just gonna keep replicating my insecure attachment history and deepening the wounds I already carry. And so I know, again, some of the parts of us and the wounds we've incurred can be drawn to people like that for various reasons I won't get into in this video today. And so I know it's a hard thing to break out of, but that's the whole idea of working, trying to identify a few people, whether it's a coach, a therapist, a friend who's got these characteristics, a family member who's got them, so I can start having these experiences. Because the only thing that changes the brain and creates the neuroplastic changes that we want to get you, removed from the trauma and into secure attachment is experience. So you have to have these experiences. You can't read books about this stuff, just watch videos on this stuff, and not actually do it. And I know that I see that a lot sometimes with clients where they're watching videos, seminars, books, all these things because they're trying to bypass the relational element, but there's no getting around that piece of it. In the end, it will be well worth it, but I know it's really scary. So just find your edge and just go from that place. All right, so here's the last part of this. How do I develop that secure attachment? It made me think when I was putting this video together that, you go on YouTube and it's like, how to make $1 million in 2024, or someone would say, how did you make your first million? We've all asked questions like that at times. I don't ever see people typically saying like, how did you develop secure attachment? And in the grand scheme of things, that's gonna change your life much more than $1 million will. If you've got insecure attachment patterns and you make $1 million, you're still gonna have those insecure attachment patterns, and they're gonna sabotage half of what you do, if not everything that you do. So then get this correct, and if you find something you love and you learn how to do it, you make $1 million, great. But I think for me, this is even more valuable. So then asking people, which goes back to Sue Johnson, who developed emotionally focused couples therapy. She looked at the time, couples therapy was so focused on the negative, or people are theorizing, hypothesizing, how do people create good connections? What do they do, or how do you get out of this bad stuff? And so she just started tracking, watching, observing videotapes of couples who did well. What do they do differently? What is it they do that the other ones who don't do well don't? So that's what we're looking for, is like, okay, I routed off a list of characteristics of somebody who has capacity for secure attachment. So you have to have these experiences of being empathized with, responded to, seen, witnessed. So in my office, when I'm working with clients, we have the experience. So I'm looking for corrective experiences. What is the opposite of what wounded my client? If they didn't feel heard, I want them to feel heard. If they didn't feel seen, I want them to feel seen. If they didn't experience empathy and non-judgment and compassion, I want them to experience those things in droves. Then what we're gonna do is we're gonna track and reflect on the experience itself, particularly the felt sense of it. And so the felt sense is just, what's the feeling, the internal sensations, the body activation of the feeling of getting that good thing. And this is so crucial because oftentimes people get to the point where they've had the thing, but they haven't reflected and got the felt sense of the thing. So then they're really missing out on what would create the biggest neuroplastic changes in their nervous system and brain. So then if I'm working with someone and I say something affirmative to them, which usually they've gotten criticized so much growing up, and then I ask them, what was it like to hear that from me, or what happened when I said that? And they say, it feels kind of nice. And I say, okay, where do you feel nice in the body? What communicates to you that I feel nice? They're like, well, my shoulders feel relaxed and I feel kind of a warmness, maybe a little bit of excitement feeling right here, or calmness, or whatever it is. And then I say, okay, can we just focus on that for a moment and then just track it and see what happens? Does it spread, move, go up and down in intensity? Does it start taking my mind to other positive thoughts or imagery? So we want to really focus on the experience. We're not there just having a conversation. That's a piece of it, but it's not going to create the necessary changes that really get you developing towards that earned secure attachment. So the great thing that we know about definitively, which I talk about again all the time in these videos, is neuroplasticity. You're not just stuck with what you got. You can change these things, and there's specific actions, objectives, tasks that I walk you through, or that I try to walk you through in these videos of how you can do this. Like if you don't have a good therapist or somebody in your life who can do this as a professional, long term, I would definitely highly recommend that. But find people who can be parts of that, and then take, whether it's myself, other books or videos that you watch, really take things that teach you how to focus on the experiential aspect of these things. So again, get the thing, whether that was being witnessed, heard, responded, felt, understood, and then what does that actually feel like on a felt level? Let me sit with that feeling and ride that wave as far as it'll take me. Now, if you get anxiety all of a sudden, or you go numb and dissociate, that just tells you there's some kind of defense against that can be identified and shifted. You can, again, email us all the time. I'll give it out again at the end of the video. Questions about these things, places you got stuck, whatever that may be. So, we can help you walk through it, or anyone else that's helping you, just so you have a basic understanding of what I'm shooting for, what it takes to actually change and heal these things. And again, just countless research studies that are innumerable almost at this point just show that you can create that post-traumatic growth and healing and transformation. From your traumas, the number one thing is developing and experiencing secure attachment. Then your ability to make better decisions, regulate your emotions, be more empathetic, be more social, develop and maintain healthy connections, sustain them, all comes out of that secure attachment. And then the amazing thing too is that you don't even need the person there with you. It travels. So an example is a lot of my clients, which again, don't be discouraged, because I would say the bulk of my clients walk in having no secure attachment history. And so at a period during our work together, doing all these things that I'm talking about now, they start to internalize that, and then not only are their abilities getting better, but they'll tell me things like, I was in this situation the other day, and I just started to panic, or I was getting ready to lose it, and I saw your face, and I thought about what we talked about in session and what we did, and then I calmed me down, and I was able to come up with a solution or a behavior that was more effective than what I typically do. And so then that secure attachment travels. So if you feel securely attached and connected to others, it really opens up a lot of our other neurological systems like play, exploration, creativity, and it's a springboard that you go off and now transcend trauma and go higher than you were before the trauma in terms of a lot of your capacities and abilities. So again, if you watch this video all the way to the end, I hope it was worth your time and you got value from it. When you do, it helps us help more people, because then the more you watch, the more people they show these kind of things to on YouTube. And we just want to help as many people as we possibly can. If you have any questions about this video, would like to learn more about it, I'd like to talk to my wife, Bissan, about it, just reach us at hawkinscounselingcenter.com anytime, and we'll definitely respond to you. So if you feel like anyone that you know, care about, love, could benefit from this, just forward it on to it, share it with them, because like I said, our main mission here is just to help as many people as possible. All right, guys, thank you again for watching this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.